Okay, we are recording. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem Mondays. As I stated previously, I had some family issues and stuff. I wasn't able to stream last Monday, but I want to stay in with doing this as regularly as possible. So this is not going to be live. I'll probably be showing this as a premiere and have live commentary and be in the chat with everyone when this comes out on Monday. But I'm recording this my Saturday night and Simon's Sunday afternoon, right, Simon?
That is correct. Yes,
Okay.
it is 2:50
Okay.
in the afternoon. Yeah,
And it's 10:50 here in North Carolina. So and that's really, it works out because of the massive time difference here, and just to be showing this like whenever I so please. And I wanted to get Simon on the horn pretty soon. Out of like all my favorite YouTubers, my buddies that make videos, Simon does the Explosive Action channel, which I'd say equal amounts of music discussion as well as movie collecting stuff. And just an interesting guy that's been at it for a while. So Simon, how you doing?
I am well. I am hot.
Good.
It is not winter down here.
Yeah.
It is in fact summer, and Australian summers can be scorching, and today is no exception. You can see the sweat beads coming off my head.
Yep.
Unpleasant, but yeah. Otherwise, I'm doing dandy.
Right. And you've got your whole like man cave thing going on in your garage there. It's air conditioned. It's air conditioned, right? Like I would think.
No, I would wish.
Nope.
We have some sort of grand plans, but the way that these garages work, I don't know if the roller door garage door is a type of door that you guys might be familiar with, but you can't really seal the room properly. So if I was to run an air conditioning, it would cool down half the road, and I'd be paying for it.
Right.
We've got some plans.
Gotcha. Is it kind of like the kind that like shops have, where it kind of rolls up, like in front of like?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Ours are, I mean, kind of similar, but same kind of deal, really. Like that they don't really seal off an area enough.
No.
Fair enough. So, as I go forward with this kind of interview, conversational kind of format that I'm shooting for here, trying to streamline things a little bit better and have like common topics that I bring up at the beginning of each of these. And one big one is, what have you been spinning this week? Which, not the most original of concepts, especially when you're a music YouTuber, a music collector, but a valid question regardless. So what you got on the stack this week, my man?
That is a valid question. And as is usual, and I know you'd be in exactly the same scenario, you do a video with all your latest stuff, and as soon as you get it uploaded, knock at the door, and the postman shows up with 10 more things. And then that's what you're listening to. So I've got a bunch of stuff that has yet to make its way to video, and I've just been playing that. It all came really cheap Discog stuff from a local seller. One of those deals when you find one and you go, oh, that's pretty good, $5. And then what else do you have? Oh, okay, add to cart. And I got all this random stuff that was really cheap. But the first one, the reason for it was this one here, which is a band is called Ancient Gods.
Okay.
This is an EP from like 2001. Essentially, this is the Chasm.
Oh, wow.
This is most of the Chasm doing a bit more of a black thing. And it's a 5-track EP. That's like 25 minutes or something, 4-track. It's fantastic. It sounds exactly like you think, it's early 2000s Chasm, but a bit blacker, a little bit more raw.
All right.
Really, really good.
Vocally similar, or more of a raspy kind of thing, or?
Yeah, I'd say both. It is vocally similar, but it does have a bit more of a rasp to it. But it's the same kind of, it's melodic, but it's still incredibly heavy. Like, you can't call it melodic death metal or anything. Like, it's the Chasm-ish, but a little bit more black. It's a one and done. All they did was this EP, as far as I can tell. So that's what I've been playing. That's the first thing. This is all the stuff I added because the covers looked cool. I was really at that. I was at that level of, oh, that one looks pretty good. Okay, this is a band called, what's this, Orcus? Just some random like early 2000s. I think it's Swedish melodic black metal, but it sounds like sort of 1997, like melodic death, melodic black metal kind of thing. Again, I don't know how many albums these guys did, but it's one of those things at the moment, like this kind of non-exceptional black metal is kind of scratching that itch a bit. You know, like it.
Sure.
You know what it sounds like. You know what you're going to get, and it's incredibly green, which I like.
It is very green.
Which in fact is a bit of a theme for the rest of these. They all happen to be green. This is a band called Creon, Kreon. Album's called Impact Winter. These guys are German, I think.
Okay.
Playing a kind of like mid-2000s kind of Deeds of Flesh, but a bit more melodic, kind of very mid-2000s death metal.
Death metal. Is it from that era, or does it just sound like it's from that era?
I think it is. Like, all this stuff was pretty much, 2000 to 2006. Like, that was just what I ended up getting. So, yeah, it's good. Good stuff. I've been enjoying that one. This one, Infinitum Obscura, which I think is another one with some chasm associations to it. I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Again, this one's really good. Just more that 2000s kind of death black stuff. Really just, not really paying a great deal of attention to what I was buying. I was just in one of those moods. Just add to cart anything that looked interesting. And yeah, that's the guys on that one. So that's good. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I've been playing at the moment.
Cool. I think I just grabbed a handful. I'm not sure if I'm gonna. Again, I'm kind of in the beta phase of like this sort of format, but I grabbed 5 of mine that I guess I'll talk about. There's a grind label. More, I guess, on the, I don't know. It's hard to say if it's really more on the punk side of grind or whatever. But there's a grind label from Iowa. I believe the guy's friends with Ben, Mortville Noise, that they reissue all kinds of real noisy grind and a lot of fairly obscure stuff. And it's stuff that I'm not familiar with. But the label guy contacted me and he was like, hey, would you feel pressured to like talk about my stuff if I sent you like a stack of CDs? And I was like, well, Ben sent me a stack of your CDs a couple of months ago and I liked all of it. So you're cool to send me stuff and I will talk about it. And he's like, some of the stuff's a little bit more on the noisy side. And I wasn't sure what to expect with that. And I think I talked about that recently where I was like, well, what do you mean? Like power electronics or something? But he meant just like really, really raw grindcore, essentially. There's this band, BRB, does not mean be right back. They're German.
Yeah, right.
Barbarosa's Barbarian. I'm sure I slaughtered that, but Legendarian Virtuosen. They're around from 92 to 94. And it's one of these collections of like multiple recordings. I think the track listing goes into the 90s, like the number of songs. Extremely raw, brutal, kind of punky grind stuff. Reminds me of like really early Cripple Bastards, maybe a little bit. Lots of goofy shit. Like the first song's like a grind version of the Batman theme from the show from the 60s. Real like, kind of fun. There's like they're having a lot of fun. They're having a lot of good laughs. They do like a really weird bad cover of Fade to Black by Metallica that has like some of the same notes, kind of, sort of, So that's a lot of fun. You'd probably appreciate this, Simon. This is a band called Wadge. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're long-standing Canadian kind of drum machine. Grindcore. This is a concept record / like rock opera kind of thing called Grindcore Penitentiary, about like just that, like all the grindcore heavyweights being in a jail together, like a big jail, big prison. Like
that's pretty unique.
It's really funny. Embery Drop the Soap is one of the names of the song. it's just all these goofy like grindcore tropes and like people battling it out and all that. It's ridiculous, but it's a lot of fun. The guy who runs the label, his band Captain Three Leg. They're split with they have a ton. They've been around forever. They have a ton of splits. with Burt Bacharach, who's another band that has a ton of splits, more like wild grind stuff. I mean, Captain Three Leg is a lot more like straightforward than I imagined them to be. They remind me, I mean, again, like I don't know if it would make the guy from the band cringe or not, but like they remind me a lot of that power violence stuff that I liked in the 90s, like Spaz and shit like that. A little bit different, a little bit crazier and stuff, but and they probably have stuff that's a lot noisier too. And then outside of that, I got sent this from another friend of mine that runs a label. This is going to be sold in my distro. This band, The Last Season, called it Civilization. It's a band from my hometown. It's like at a certain point in my hometown, a lot of the guys that were into like metallic hardcore and like the kind of straight edge scene dudes got really into sludge. And a lot of them.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. A lot of them stopped being sober, like grew their hair long, started wearing like leather armbands and shit. And like, a lot of them went on, a bunch of those guys went on to this band God Below, which I don't know if it would be your cup of tea per se, but they were very good. They borrowed a lot from some of the heavier hardcore stuff, but also like the New Orleans shit and a little bit of melodic Swedish death metal too. And Last Season's kind of a continuation of that kind of stuff. It's heavier, kind of sludgy stuff, but definitely like more along the lines of like aggressive hardcore kind of singing, not really like I Hate God thing or something like that. And finally,
I was going to say, yeah, that I Hate God sludge style is something that I've never been drawn to. That style.
Yeah, them specifically, it took me a while to get around to it, like to really sit down and listen to a lot of it regularly. I had a big jag with a bunch of it where like I listened to tons of it like a year or two ago. I just gave it the treatment. And I liked certain albums from it. Like I liked one I Hate God record. I liked one Crowbar record, that kind of stuff. But I went more in on it relatively recently. But anyway, Last Season's like kind of a good example of kind of their a unique twist on that. There's some really nice acoustic guitar and like mellow moments in it too that almost reminds me of like, I don't know, like maybe more like Death Doom or like Peaceville kind of stuff going on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that'd be more appealing to me.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm not sure if it would be your cup of tea or not. And then finally, I've been meaning to own this forever. Pig Destroyer Prowler in the Yard.
Oh, that's their best. That is their best by far.
And like, I remember when it came out, I remember hearing it a ton. I just never owned it. I remember it being a big deal for all my friends. And I've, it's one of those like very strong records. Like I have a lot of stuff to listen to and I'm busy a lot and don't have time to like listen to music as much as I'd like. And I've spun this 4 times since I got it like 3 days ago. Not that it's, it's a quick record, but I mean, yeah.
I love the intro and the outro.
Yeah. Real weird. Like, really.
Yeah. It's really, really weird. Particularly like the intro is weird enough, but when you actually get to the very end of the CD and listen to the full outro and you get the whole story, it just becomes very, I don't know how to describe it. It's incredibly weird. That story at the end. It's really tight grind.
Whatever that voice effect they're using on it is just that robotic. Ugh, it makes my skin crawl just thinking about it. All right, so how long exactly have you been doing the channel? How long has Explosive Action been in existence?
Oh, I'll give you the short version. I originally didn't do it as a channel. Explosive Action as a name started as a blog, a web reviews blog. So it all comes back to another blog that I was reading at the time called the Direct to Video Connoisseur, which was, I thought, absolutely hilarious, very casual way of doing movie reviews. And all the guy, his name is Matt, all he reviews was exactly what it says on the tin, just movies that were direct to video. And he made himself this connoisseur, like a big fan, and would give reviews for, like Steven Seagal's 16th movie. He'd give them the attention of an Oscar-worthy movie. Nice. I thought that was brilliant. And I thought, I could do something like this. And I like the action films. And that got me into diving into more direct-to-video action films. Like I was always a big fan of all your Schwarzeneggers and Stallones and that kind of thing. But then around about the same time I found this guy's blog, I found that, you could walk into the shops and there were all these Van Damme movies that were after Street Fighter 2. Like I thought he just vanished. But No, he kept going, and I just dug into these things that were shot in Bulgaria and 12 people have seen, and started to do reviews for this stuff. And trying to think of the name, the original name I was coming up with was I was going to call it Shitflix. I thought that was hilarious, but then I thought if I called it Shitflix, no one's ever going to send me promo copies of anything. so I was reading the back of a DVD, and it said, the most explosive action movie ever. Well, that's a good name. So yeah, that's how the blog started. I kept that. I don't do it that often. I still keep going back to it, but I should do it more often. But then I started, it was YouTube. I started looking at other people talking about this kind of film, and I found people talking about DVD collections, and I didn't know that was a thing on YouTube. People just, these are the DVDs I bought this week. Like, that's interesting, and a way to talk to people about stuff. And I didn't really know anyone else to talk to about these movies. That was about 2010.
Okay.
And I'm about 2011. I thought, okay, I'll do this myself. That was the time I got my first smartphone. I got like an old iPhone 3. I'm like, okay, well, let's start filming my collection. And just went on from there.
Gotcha. So the blog itself was started when, like 2007 or something, or?
I think 2010.
Okay.
Maybe 2009. I'd have to look it up.
I feel like that was an era of just blogs, because I had one. It wasn't titled Ground Zero Salem. I didn't live in Salem at the time, but it was called In a Time of Hate, and that was in the era of like what was Aesop Decker's blog? Something Hearse. I'm brain farting on it, but there were a bunch of different like MP3 blogs, at least that were music centered. And I had one of those where, I ripped a lot of my record collection and demos and stuff that was like stuff that wasn't even on the internet, and did the whole zip file thing. And that was really fun. That was kind of a time I sort of, Cosmic Hearse is the name of the one I'm trying to think of.
Oh, right. Cool.
That was great. There's a lot of crazy stuff that he put up on there. And there was a lot of other like old punk stuff that I would discover through that. There were metal ones. Like it was a really cool time. So yeah, like I feel like that era of like the late 2000s was definitely the era of blogs. And I still have all my old uploads too, like in I have a MediaFire thing that I should probably transfer all of them, because that's not going to last forever, I feel like.
It's funny you say that. I have a MediaFire as well from when I was uploading stuff to forums back in 08, 09, 2010. And it's the one that is alive. Like your Rapid Share's gone and all those ones are gone. But my MediaFire is still there with uploads from 2008, quite happily sitting in there. So I don't know. They're lasting.
Yeah, I don't know I mean, I think I actually do have most of those in my Dropbox from that I keep with like all my pretty much my entire CD collections in my Dropbox. I rip everything, but at any rate, and you did start talking about records and music and stuff a little bit later, correct? Like,
yeah, it was quite a bit later. So I was doing just DVD related, movie related videos for at least 6 years, moving on to almost 7 years, and I realized that there's a whole half of me that I'm not talking about, and I wanted to talk about music as well. And that's when would have been around about 2017 I started looking and saw Ben's videos. I think were the first ones I saw. I just went into YouTube and just looked for like death metal video or something like that, and just found that people were doing the same thing that I was doing about DVDs, but about CDs and records. So I did one test upload where I was just talking about CDs, and at the time I was still I wasn't on the camera, just holding my things and hold the CD and film that. That was just the way I did things since day one. But I got a better camera, and I saw that everyone else was on camera now. The age of just hands being on the video there was less and less people doing that. So I've turned the camera around, and I thought it was a bit scary at first, to be honest, to
Yeah.
change my approach and put myself on camera. I didn't like it originally, but I got used to it, and then I got good feedback on the first metal upload, and then that's when I started to really see the combination of the audience. There was people that were into the horror movies and into death metal, and there was quite a lot of that.
Oh, sure.
And that's where it kind of started, because I was always showing it was called explosive action, but I was mainly talking about horror because that was the stuff that was being released. Like all the DVD and Blu-ray labels mainly focus on horror, so that's the stuff I was talking about, stuff I was buying, and that appeals to most metal fans as well. So yeah, and then just records came into it again in about 2017, late 2017, when restarted that collection. I had a record collection back in 2004, and as we all have done at some point, sold the whole lot. Kept all my CDs. CDs never went, but yeah, as a 24-year-old kid, I didn't know how to properly use a turntable. Everything sounded bad, and I thought, "Oh, that's just records." So I just got rid of the whole lot. Then I returned to it much later, and yeah, you can.
I was the opposite way. Like I didn't have a proper turntable for a very long time, and then when I did, I didn't really know how to use it properly for a very long time. But for me, it was the whole allure of like vinyl. You know, I kind of bought the whole, which is true, I think, for the most part. You can hem and haw back and forth about it and argue the finite points or whatever, but like many do. But I was like, oh, well, there's more analog warmth and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, if I'm going to listen to stuff digitally, why would I anyway, like with the convenience of MP3s, why would I have compact discs? And at a certain point, I was down to like, I mean, I still had a bunch of CDs, but I probably had like maybe a couple hundred that was like ones that I had some sort of like emotional attachment to that I'd had forever and just couldn't bear to part with. But then I think, I don't know, it was a little bit before, like a few years before I started making videos. There's something about metal in particular that like, it's great on vinyl. I like having it on vinyl. I'm just speaking my own personal truth here, but like, just like, I think it's because whenever I was a kid in the 90s buying death metal CDs, I bought them on CD. There's something about just cracking open a new death metal CD with the top strip and the, Seagrave-esque artwork. It just feels right to me.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And getting back into vinyl in 2017, the first things I was buying was 1980s thrash.
Yeah.
Because for me, 80s thrash and 80s speed metal and the more dirtier heavy metal, that's vinyl. I can't listen to that stuff on CD. It doesn't make sense. But it makes sense on vinyl.
I absolutely agree. Not to say that I don't have some of that stuff on vinyl, but
yeah,
I mean, for me, like in the late 90s, especially because I was briefly for like a year in Rochester, New York, which is a very metal town. It's where Danny Lilker lives now. Metallica Kill 'Em All was recorded there. The Rods were based out of there. Like there's a lot of history there. But in the late 90s, a lot of like straight up real deal, like Hesher metal stuff. There were still a lot of metal bands going on and everything, but there was kind of in this ironic phase where nobody really wanted to be metal, and there was a lot of people who had sold their collections, and I got like the 80s creator discography for like $5 or $6 a pop on vinyl there.
Wow.
And like the first 3 Accused records for similar prices and a bunch of stuff real cheap. And I, at the time, I had that mindset. Well, I'm like, well, records kind of suck, but I'm broke. And like, they sound like crap. They're all scratchy, but at least I have these. There's no other way to listen to them. I couldn't find those on any other format at the time. So,
right.
And now I'm like, these are worth like $75, like whatever. And not that I'm going to part with them. Like they're very near and dear to me, but yeah, like I'm glad I bought them when I did. But yeah, you're right about certainly anything on noise records. Jesus, like, all that stuff on vinyl is like just perfect. So
that's exactly right. Yeah. That's the stuff I'm basically talking about is old noise records, old road racer stuff. Like it just makes sense to me to be on vinyl. Road racer was a funny one too. That you know, road racer, road runner, RC. When I was getting into metal, that was all, you know, Sepultura and then Deicide and Suffocation and that kind of thing. But when I was going back and looking at 80s records, I just kept finding all this random stuff that was on Road Racer.
Yeah.
Lots of like one and done thrash bands and speed bands that is one album. So many. And then Road Racer. It didn't even occur to me that Road Racer did that stuff. So
well,
it's been cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got it as well, that reissue of that Artillery record that just came out, and that was like the debut, their American debut that came out on Road Racer, and I think that was the only thing. And like going back to like Annihilator, they had so many bands back then, and the whole confusion between Road Racer and Road Runner. And
I think that was because you had Road Runner and Coyote in America, so there was something to do with that, like copyright.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was also the hardcore, kind of like how Combat had Combat Core, and like there was Death Records as a subsidiary of Metal Blade. Road Racer had Hawker Records, which was a bunch of the New York bands, and then later the same guy, Howie, that started that subset, started signing just Biohazard and like Typo Negative and Life of Agony directly to Roadrunner, and it was like, for better or for worse, a big game changer, you know, for that label. But
most of my early stuff, my very, very first like 10 CDs I ever bought were Roadrunner, like you know, Chaos AD, Machine Head, Burn My Eyes, you know, like Demanufacture.
Yeah,
I was a Roadrunner kid in 1995.
Oh
so
yeah,
that's just what you got. Everything was.
Because I mean, I don't know if it was similar down your way, but where I grew up, and I did a little bit of the tape trading and a little bit of the writing to zines and stuff, not a lot, but you know, Syracuse wasn't half bad, like what the town I grew up in terms of like the mall chains with getting hard to find stuff. But most of the stuff close to me, it was all Roadrunner and Earache, if you were lucky. You know, my friend who lived in a suburb that was a little ways out from me, he had a good Camelot Music, which Marty talks about a lot, which was a chain that had a bit more, and they had Relapse stuff. So that was like, oh shit, we got to get down to that mall, because they have like the Corporate Death compilation and that stuff. I can get Benediction CDs from there. It's weird how location will just kind of affect, you know, everything that you buy and listen to as a kid, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, locally to me, growing up, you know, mid late 90s, not much money, only buying CDs, saving up for a month to buy one CD. I basically had two local places I could go. There was one place called Power Station Records, which was a great name. That was in the local sort of the big shopping center, the big mall. And they had, I think, it's hard to really remember what they stocked, but they at least had, from my memory, at least 1/4 of the shop was metal. And me in 95, 94, 95, probably just dipping my toes in and going through it, going, I don't know what any of this is. And I remember picking up a Death CD, going, that looks really scary, and putting it back. So I don't remember how much I bought there, but move on to like 96, 97, there was another record shop that opened that was used records only, used records, used CDs. And I can't remember the name of that place. Oh, Mad Hatters. It was called Mad Hatters. And I befriended the shop owner. So I'm this 16-year-old kid, and after school, because we finished school at 3 in the afternoon, so I'd rock up to the CD shop and just go through everything. And I got my first Sepultura there. I got a used copy of Beneath the Remains on RC, I think. I got Absu Barathrum, and I had no idea what the hell I was buying.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I still got that. It's the original old Osmos press of that. I just picked it up because I'm like, well, that looks a bit like Cradle of Filth. Didn't know what I was getting.
Sure. Got a thorny logo. Why not? You know?
Yeah, exactly. So that was a cool shop. But of course, I mean, the place that all of us went was into the Big Smoke, into the city, to Utopia Records. And that's the Sydney store, right? It's the
Right.
home of heavy metal. It's been there since 1978. It just keeps moving location, but that's when, 97, 98, I would go into the city, get the train, and I found all of my collection for many years. I got my first job in the city, 99, and every lunch break I'd just be going down to Utopia and just emptying my money,
Hmm.
coming out of there with
Oh,
Cryptopsy
yeah.
CDs and Nile CDs and things like that. Great time.
And that was a great era for that stuff too. I remember like Relapse was just previously it was just to me like this weirdo label that put out like the most extreme shit that I could find if I could get a hold of it. I think I was talking to Marty about getting the old like photocopied catalogs in the mail,
Yep.
and like I was always curious about the non-metal stuff that they sold that was like the weird noise and ambient stuff. I was like, I don't know if I
Yep.
like this or I wouldn't, but it's kind of interesting that they carry it. And then I feel like
Yep.
that period, probably between like 97 and 99, they did Nile. There was like Cephalic Carnage, Blood Duster, all
Yeah,
this
they got
crazy,
reissued with them. Yep.
yeah, Human Remains, like all this crazy
Yes.
shit came out on that label, and a lot of it was just like a massive game changer. And not that I was the biggest fan of some of it, but that kind of crossover into between like really technical death metal and like hardcore with Dillinger Escape Plan, and I think Burnt by the Sun might have been a little bit later. And I'm not even 100% on if they did a lot on Relapse, but
The
Dave Whitty
first
was,
one was, I think.
yeah, Dave Whitty was in that band. Origin, I mean, they were a
Yep.
straight up metal band, but I remember a lot of hardcore kids liking them and stuff. So,
Yep.
like, all that stuff was just wild for the time. And I was sort of on the periphery of it for a lot of it because a lot of it was too technical for me at the time. I was really into like crust punk and grindcore that was a little bit more simplistic. That's where my personal tastes were at the time. But I imagine I think I have a few years on you. So like getting really into music like right then, or like being around the age where you got your first job and like just
Yep.
just scooping all that shit up, like, must be
Yeah,
rad.
it was great. I mean, I was in 98. I was 18, so I'm a
Okay.
1980 kid.
Yeah, I'm 2 years older than you, so basically
Right.
same age, really, by today's standards. But
Yeah, but like, my first job in 99, and getting paid not that much, but also I'm still living at home, so I have no expenses.
yep,
So the paycheck comes in, I just took it to Utopia. That's just what happened. Yeah, and
that's
just
sweet.
I got so much of my collection, and the majority of it I've still got, except for some of the poor decisions that I made. But
And what about like around that time? Like, what was going on in like your area in Sydney, like in terms of the local scene and the bands
yeah, the
there?
local scene was good. So yeah, again, right time, right age, 19, going on to 20. I started to go to my first gigs.
Mhm.
I mean, my first gig ever was 96, and I went and saw Pantera, and it was a huge, massive thing,
Sure.
and I've still got hearing damage from that night. Absolutely shockingly loud. But then chalk and cheese, I went from that, and then in 97, I went and saw Damaged, who's a
Oh, was that
Melbourne.
Kevin Sharp era or
No,
yeah,
before he joined. Um,
cool.
so yeah, 97, they just released Token Remedies Research, which is my favorite. And there's such a, like, you look at on the surface, you go, that's a grindcore band, but they're not, and they refer to themselves as hatecore, which is whatever. But it's weird. Like, they use the hardcore stylizing. Like, whenever their posters were put up, it was Damaged, and they put an X between every letter, like
Huh.
hardcore bands do. So I saw them in 97 at an all ages show, which was rare. And the singer was renowned, I learned later, which is probably why he was replaced with Kevin Sharp, for not showing up.
Okay.
So we're all waiting, these kids on the front stage, and the band's there, and they just start playing, and everyone's going, but there's no vocalist. What's going on? And I just did instrumental Damage for about 3 tracks, and we're getting into it, but still going, where's the singer? And then the guitarist on the fourth song just tries to do vocals, and he's obviously not that experienced at them, so he just screams them out. And we're like, well, you're trying. But yeah, the vocalist didn't show up, and that's not the first time that was the case. So that was like the first local thing. But the around about 99 to 2000, I'd say, to the year 2000 when I'm 20, that was peak gigs for me. There was a city pub called the Iron Duke Hotel. Every Saturday night, there'd be 6 to 7 bands. You pay $8. There was about 5 merch desks selling CDs. The same people were there every Saturday, so you'd see all these new friends that you were meeting at gigs. And I saw the best of Australian bands at their prime. So Bloodduster, Damaged, Nazul, Lord Chaos, Bremelin, Misery, Astrial, like so many killer bands. And it was one of those ones where like there's the stage, the bar, and the outdoor beer garden. So the band members themselves would always go into the beer garden outside. So you ended up just meeting people from bands.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was like the entirety of the year 2000 was just going to these gigs at the Iron Duke, and I met friends that I still see at gigs now. Yeah, that was the Sydney scene. That particular pub and the bands that were playing there and the little mini festivals they put on. It was so recurrent that I ended up getting newspaper articles about this heavy metal scene in Sydney. So it was really cool to be part of that.
That's awesome. I've always been curious about that too, because I'm not an expert on the Australian scene, but there are a lot of bands that I like, ranging from all the old stuff and hardcore bands like Extortion and and I've always kind of because there's a handful of cities. There's Perth, there's Melbourne, there's Sydney, and like the United States is massive, but I think now more and more things have gotten more homogenized and samey sounding because of the internet and everything, no matter where you go. But I was always curious, like coming up, was there a different token sound between like Sydney and Melbourne or anything along those lines?
Yeah, and a lot of it still plays out, like the Adelaide South Australian bands. I mean, it might be down to a lot of them sharing members, but there's a flavor in that sound, like this. I call it the Stargazer sound.
Oh, Sacrifice and that stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. They all have this flavor to their sound. It's a dry kind of death metal sound. It only seems to come out of them. The Sydney sound was probably the most varied, I think. There was a lot of black metal, a lot of death metal. There's a lot of groovy kind of bouncy stuff around that era. Melbourne, though, Victoria, that was just grind. That's grind. Okay.
Is that where
Damage, Bloodduster, they're all down there. The Kill, all that stuff's down there.
Kill, Captain Cleanoff.
Yeah, Captain Cleanoff. I'm not sure. They could have been Sydney. They're either Sydney or Melbourne, but Cleanoff. They played so many gigs. My God. And then you had the Outcasts in like Tasmania.
Oh wow!
Down there in their own little island, and then I think Fuck I'm Dead were from down there.
So it was going to be the next one I was going to, because when I think of Australian grinds, I think of those two for whatever reason. Because I got both those CDs at the same time, like early 2000s. I think I think they both came out on Razorback.
Yes,
I was just like, oh, this is awesome! This crazy Aussie, like drum machine grind. Like this is wild.
We had a few of them. Yeah, I mean, Fuck I'm Dead were probably the most over the top because they just set the drum machine to like as fast as it would go. But they weren't the first. The one that we all saw in Sydney was Volatile.
Okay.
They were a bit more death grind.
Okay. Not familiar with them. But...
Yeah. So they were drum machine death metal death grind in the mid 90s to late 90s. And they have album titles that you would not be allowed to release now. I'll leave you to look up Volatile later, but
I'll research that independently.
Yeah, I think you might want to, but very Australian sounding. But I saw them at one of the Iron Duke gigs, and I was well drunk at that point, right up the front, and they're 3-piece with the drum machine, and they had they made the drum machine a member, so they had like a record player, and they got a styrofoam head, and they put it on the record player, so the head would spin, and that was the drummer. So that was cool. But their whole shtick was around barbecues. So I think one of their albums was actually called Beers, Barbecues, and Corpses, or something like that. I can't remember exactly. Booze, Barbecues, something like that. They had a barbecue on stage, but they also had pyrotechnics. And I remember being at the front, and they got like a barbecue with a gas bottle, and they're also letting off like sparklers and things, going, well, this is a good combination. One of us is going to blow up. Naked flame in a gas bottle. But they would cook a sausage. They would cook sausages on stage while doing their set. And then if you're at the front, they would hand out a slice of bread, and then they would get the tongs. They put a sausage in it, cover it in tomato sauce, and you'd be eating this partially cooked, because they didn't let them cook properly, slightly raw sausage while watching a death grind band. It was just mental.
The only thing that I saw that was even remotely that cool, there was a briefly short-lived band called Dead Black from Boston that were they were kind of that sort of power violence-y hardcore from what I can remember, but they had doomy parts that, and I'm not talking even just sludge. I mean like doomy. They had an instrumental that like kind of reminded me of like Cathedral or early Cathedral, the first album. But they only had a 3-song demo, and then they broke up. It was like one of the guys that is now in Sumerlands and all those bands, like who's in a lot of accomplished metal bands now, Innumerable Forms, like that guy. He was in this band briefly, and they had like 2 songs that were like shorter, faster hardcore songs, and then this long dirge. And during the dirge, the singer had nothing to do. So one show, he got like a plaster of Paris volcano, like you have for like, you know,
the school thing
project,
baking
soda and the vinegar, and he like pulled it out and slowly like made a big presentation out of like pouring it in. And like the other time they played it, these are both in basements in Boston, he just sat down and made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and ate it like in front of everybody. But that's not nowhere near as that's pretty awesome. I'm very happy to have seen that. But like actually just like grilling barbecue during the grindcore set, like that's pretty rad. That's pretty great.
It was pretty good. And you weren't going to turn it down. Like, you know, the band is giving you a sausage. And I remember taking a bite of it going, this is not cooked all the way through. I'm going to have a rough night.
Well, you know, what would grindcore be without a little bit of trichinosis or botulism or whatever?
Just a bit of dysentery. Yeah,
exactly. Those are all names of gore grind bands. So you're
yep, for good reason.
So if I can kind of drag the conversation a little bit back to your channel, I was curious because I watch your content fairly often, and I'm always impressed by like how well spoken and composed you are. Do you script anything? Or do you put like how much work do you put into like each update? Because it just feels very professional to me.
So the movie ones, I do them as the way I've always done them, which is pretty much just ad hoc, because with films I get more than I can watch before the update. So a lot of it is like, I haven't seen this before. There's not much to say. Whereas with music, I can just chuck it on when I'm working. You know, I don't have to look at anything. So everything that I show on the metal type videos, I've listened to multiple times. Usually they're also more focused. So the movie ones can ramble on for an hour and be 40 Blu-rays or something like that. But the music ones are like, you know, 8. There's 8 things I'm going to talk about. And I take a few key notes so I don't forget. And I just like print out some bullet points and stick them opposite the camera. So you can, not many people have noticed, but you can see on some of the music ones, I might glance down and read some notes, but it's right near the camera. So I do a little bit of prep for those. It's not so much the full language or anything. It's just usually around dates or countries that bands are from, particularly with the US. Like I'm just going to go America, which, you know, it was just the opposite when I watch your videos, because you'll talk about, you know, a micro scene in Massachusetts or something. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's all America.
Yeah, fair enough.
But, you know, I try and do that kind of thing just to get, you know, this band has got 2 members that were in this band, or try and make some notes that are, you know, So I don't just say, this is a death metal band. This is also a death metal band. This is death metal. Just a little bit, but it's not too scripted.
Yeah. I mean, you're obviously like a true fan, like the type of person I like to watch. You know, you have a good vocabulary for all the different styles and everything. Do you, and I hope this question doesn't come off the wrong way, do you have much of a taste in anything like outside of metal? Like what? Yeah, I don't know how else to put it. Like, do you? I know that you're not like super into punk or anything like that. We've all talked about that, like, you know, in our little chat or whatever. But like, do you unwind with some Blondie once in a while, or like, you know, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, look, 99% of the collection is the various extremes of metal. Then there's I've got a small stack, like maybe yay big, of stuff that is very heavily associated, so dark ambient.
Okay.
A couple of dungeon synth things.
Sure.
I've got your token goblin soundtracks and your tubular bells, some prog rock kind of stuff, and then all of that is in one section, and then by itself, 2 records by themselves, both by Billie Eilish.
Oh, there you go. My wife's a big fan.
Yeah, I like her sound. I don't know why. I have no idea why.
Hey,
I don't like any other pop music. Anything else I've ever heard, early, recent, you know, it's just bubblegum, horrible Britney Spears kind of. I don't know. Nothing has worked, and then now it gets worse and worse because it's all auto-tuned, and it just everything sounds terrible. But yeah, I tripped over her stuff one day, and I found it very interesting. And I play them quite a bit, both of the albums. But yeah, she's the exception to the rule. Yeah,
she has kind of a dark theme. Like I actually couldn't pick any of her songs out of a lineup, but my wife is a really big fan of hers. I got her. I think I made a birthday card for Amanda one year with like Billie Eilish on it, and I was like, "Happy birthday from pop sensation Billie Eilish." And
Billie Eilish, yeah. I mean, it's a weird thing. I mean, I think you're right. Like the some of the first video clips I saw, there was sort of a dark teen edge thing to it, you know, which whatever. But it seemed that I was seeing in on other videos, people like, you know, metal fans, and then there was Billie Eilish as well. It doesn't seem to be just me. There was that. Just I don't know. Her music seems to resonate with some of the metal scene. Don't know why. I know Isan from Emperor is a fan. That was interesting.
I'm not surprised by that for whatever reason.
Yeah,
fair enough.
So that's the one exception. Otherwise, yeah, it's all death metal, black metal, thrash, grind. Been getting into more only in the last, say, 3 years, into more pre-1985 heavy metal.
I think that's that's a welcome to your 40s kind of thing. I feel like me too.
I reckon you're right. I reckon you are right. But it's still at a like. It's always got to have a grit. Like I can put somebody will recommend something from 1984, and I'll put it on, and they'll say, yeah, it's great heavy metal, and I'll put it on, and I'll go, there's no balls in this. I don't like it. It needs to have balls to it, and there's a lot of that stuff that was not the glam heavy metal, but it was listed as heavy metal, and a lot of that new wave of British heavy metal stuff. It just sounded more hard rock, and I can't do hard rock. It just doesn't work.
It depends. It depends with me. Like I've gotten, I don't know, my tastes are all over the place. Like I've had times in my life where I've just been into stuff that's like more straightforward and anthemic. Like I had years when I was mostly into just like punk and Thin Lizzy and New Model Army and stuff, and wasn't listening to much metal. But when I've been in a metal phase, it's kind of hard for me to reconcile like bands like Saxon, who it's like this is a new wave of British heavy metal band, but it sounds more like 70s glam, harder 70s glam, and like AC/DC. And for some reason, for a while, I couldn't wrap my head around it. Now I like it, but I still don't like it as much as Pagan Altar or something along those lines.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Like some of these ones, I've just got to cherry pick. Like Warlord's awesome. Like I love
Mhm.
that stuff. Warlord's great. But even classics like Judas Priest, the only way I can listen to the early stuff is on the Live in Japan album, where it
That's
sounds more metal.
yeah,
You know,
that's a great record. I mean, they
it's great.
definitely freshened up a lot of stuff on that.
Yeah,
I don't, I
it,
don't know, Priest and Scorpions and stuff like that. For me, that's I think with the big name bands that are real heavy hitters wrote such good songs that I'm into it, but it's kind of the B and C tier, like more obscure, only did a single new wave of British heavy metal bands. Like
mm-hmm.
it's got to be more in the lane of like Motorhead or Diano era Maiden or something like that. If it's more leaning into like 70s hard rock, I mean, it has to be really good songs. And a lot of those bands to
Mm-hmm.
me are kind of obscure for a reason. I mean, you know, but like
Yep.
certain bands like that's that label Splattered that reissue stuff, they dig up Reed there from Speedwolf and Overdose. He digs up a lot of stuff where I was like, well, yeah, I never heard of this, but I really like it. So it depends, And I mean,
It does. Yeah.
but like I've even just recently been like, okay, early Dokken and Rat, I'm in. I like it now.
Yeah.
I
Fair
hated it
enough.
for years, I mean, like that's hard. That's hard for me to do. Like, it's,
You
but,
you gotta reconcile that with yourself.
it's I every day it's just it's a struggle getting through
But
it.
yeah, like um, a lot of this 80s metal stuff. I think I'm in kind of a lucky space here that I have a lot of Discogs saved searches, and I can cast the net wide because I can just go targeted to Australia only, like who is shipping from
Mhm.
Australia. If you were
Right.
going to say, find me all the heavy metal in the United States, that list is you can't
Oh
keep up
yeah.
with it. But doing that in Australia, I only have to refresh that a couple of times a day, so I can stay on top of this list. And I see random things show up and go, "That looks pretty cool." And then I click on it and go, "Oh, it's on Mausoleum. All right, play it on YouTube." And I just skip through every song for 10 seconds and go, "Oh God, where's the piano? I know there's going to be piano. Where's the waiting for the ballad? And if I can get through it without a ballad, we're good to go."
Ship it.
Add to cart. Yeah.
And I'm curious too, because I like there's, Australia going back to, from what I know, going back to the 70s has this whole history with heavier stuff and like pretty aggressive music. Like the Colored Balls, like had a few songs that sounded like 70s punk well long before 77. And there's been a rock and roll spirit in your country for a long time. Was there an
Yeah.
equivalent to like new wave of British heavy metal coming out of Australia, like in the early to mid 80s, or
Well, I
maybe?
mean, I suppose the main sound is what you could colloquially call pub rock. I
Right.
mean, that's our sound, which is where your AC/DC came from,
Sure.
your
Of course.
Midnight Oil, all of the bands that as Matt from the Dark Path likes to poke me, I can't stand any of this sound. The Jimmy Barnes and Cold Chisel stuff, like it was all playing the pub circuit, and like I can appreciate that that's popular, but for me, it's I'm 10 years too young for
Mm.
that sound, and there's particular radio stations that if you turn them on, that is all you're going to get. So that's why I
Wow.
cannot listen to AC/DC. It just cannot happen because
I
if
mean,
I get into a car, it's on somewhere.
I know Americans that can't listen to AC/DC for the same reason. Like they've been
Yeah, right.
effectively like an American band for forever. I don't know if they live here or what, but like they sell all their stuff in Walmart, like they're very much like,
They're pretty global.
this part of the status quo. But I discovered the Bon Scott stuff myself personally in a vacuum when I was just getting into like rock heavier music. So to me, it's a different thing. And the same thing with like Rose Tattoo. Years later, I found Rose
Yeah,
Tattoo.
exactly. Yeah,
But I mean,
all that stuff.
was there anything that was more straight up metal though? Like anything that was more maideny or like,
Um,
or like
ooh.
speed metal-y kind of?
I mean, probably early Australian, like 1980 to 85 heavy metal is something I don't actually know a great deal about. Um, I don't know what we really had then. I mean, I sort of know more of when those bands got more extreme.
Mm,
So, Arm and Angel,
that was the band I
some of
was going
their,
to bring up. I think I got their
you know,
tape right here.
Slaughter Lord was one of the biggest ones that,
Yep.
down in with Steve Hughes. on drums. And then it didn't take much to go from Slaughter Lord to sadistic execution. To
Yeah, got my Armored Angel tape right there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, this stuff's great.
That's sort of when I didn't jump on with this stuff because I jumped on in the mid '90s, but
right,
as far back as I am really familiar with is when we got sort of thrash bands and proto death thrash bands. Like we had Mortal Sin. That was one of the biggest Sydney bands. I've got their album. It's great, and that was literally our answer to Metallica.
Very
and
much
of course,
so. Yeah,
when
heavily.
Metallica,
really good take on Metallica, though. Like great Metallica worship or whatever you want to call it.
And it would have been like, again, I was too young for this, but I do know people that are more in their 50s that were into Iron Maiden, that kind of stuff, and then got into Metallica like most people did. Mortal Sin started to exist and gave us a local Metallica, and then the worlds just collided when Metallica came out and did their first Australian show with Mortal Sin on support, and apparently just blew up. It completely blew up. That would have been wild.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Wow.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. That's about it for the questions I wrote down. Do you have any like recommendations for you? I know like you talk about horror movies the most. You're a big action buff. So, what would you say are like just off the top of your head, like a handful, like maybe 2 or 3 action movies that are seriously underrated that probably, I mean, I'm not a huge, I'm a pretty big movie guy as far as like a casual, I'd say, but I have my own collection. It's pretty meager compared to yours, and I'm sure Eric's and like my friend Mike who has done my logo and stuff. But like give me a couple that I should check out.
I'm a big fan of the I guess they're slightly cheesy because they're made by an Italian company, an Italian director trying to do American movies, but the films of Bruno Mattei. And he did a few. So he's Italian director, did stuff in Italy, but with he bring across American actors.
Okay.
So there's Strike Commando is probably one that I would recommend to anyone that likes Rambo clones.
Okay.
Missing in action, like Chuck Norris kind of clone films, but done with it's like almost a homage / rip off at the same time. But because they're filming them, like a lot of these ones were filmed by Italian crew with American actors, but then shot in the Philippines. Which is such a wonderful combination. They just got all of the Philippine stunt crew and blew them up. Right, so the body counts are huge. The explosions are massive because half the time they would just go and borrow the army.
Oh my God!
They just throw some dollar notes and borrow the army. Like Apocalypse Now was one of those ones where they borrowed the army. At the same time that Apocalypse Now was being filmed in the Philippines, things like Strike Commando and other stuff were over there doing their films and begging for some of the helicopters from the Apocalypse Now set, but Ford Coppola had taken them all. So yeah, that stuff I think is really good. I think a lot of the, I mean, obviously you would have seen a lot of the Cannon films from the 80s.
I've seen a fair amount of those, yeah.
Yeah, but there's stuff that's similar. That's a bit to the, almost like people trying to do an answer to what Cannon films were doing with their budgets and their sizes. Things like there's a movie called Kill or Be Killed and has a sequel called Kill and Kill Again, which is sort of like a mishmash of action and martial arts, but American-style martial arts with just kicking and punching and it like those things. I think that's the stuff people need to see more of, like mid-80s action films that are trying to do what Canon were doing, but even cheaper.
Yeah,
There's you could dig into that stuff.
I don't know where this flick falls in that. I don't know if it's more regarded more well known with people that are, into, B movies and stuff, because it had major names in it, but I'd never heard of it until I saw it. There was a cable channel that came with the cable package everywhere, it seemed like, in the late 2000s, early 2000 teens, called Impact, that would show like random movies that I'd never heard of. And my buddy Mike Tommyrod, I would randomly text him and be like, "What, you have this, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, that movie's awesome." I'm like, "Okay, great." Like movies like, I think it was it Cherry Hill, or it's a zombie movie where all the zombies have like gigantic ball bearing eyes. It's something Hill. That movie is really good. I saw that, never heard of it before. And the movie I'm thinking of as far as action movies go is Eye of the Tiger with Gary Busey and
yeah,
and Yaphet Kotto. And like, I'd never heard of that before, but it was an awesome like revenge action movie. And I had to go and buy it. I was like, this movie's so rad. Like, Yaphet Kotto's flying a biplane, throwing like old timey long cylindrical grenades out while blasting James Brown. Like, the bag. Like, this is so rad. Like, I was like, I need more stuff like this in my life. I have no idea how big or small, but I mean, it's pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, it's got Gary Busey, so it's got some money in it.
But I've never heard of it before.
It is like, I mean, as we said at the start, like the blog was true to its name, explosive action. If you go look on there, it's only action movies. And it like, I probably watch action movies more than horror movies. Probably, just about. Particularly now, like modern, like horror movies at the cinema. There's not been a great deal. That's why when I do the end of year lists, I can quite happily do a top 20. Hell, I could do a top 50 metal albums released in the year. But when I do the movie ones, I talk about the best physical releases on the format. I can't do my top 10 2022 movies because I haven't seen that many.
Right.
And I'm not as interested.
There was a little bit there with like a little bit of a rebirth of horror where I was like kind of interested, and there were some movies where I was like, that was pretty good. Like
there's exceptions.
I liked It Follows. Thought Starry Eyes was okay.
Starry Eyes wasn't bad. I didn't mind Starry Eyes.
And then we're going back to like almost 10 years ago now. But
yeah, no, it feels modern, but it is like a decade old. I know what you mean.
And personally, a lot of the slow burn flicks for me, like The Witch and Hereditary and all that stuff, just, I don't hate it, but I got bored. Like through a lot of those movies.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I haven't seen Hereditary or the other ones from that director, but I've seen The Witch twice, and that one I really liked. I really like the atmosphere on that one. It helps to watch it with the subtitles because of all the ye olde English.
Yeah, well, I mean, partially the only time we watched it was actually kind of ruined for us anyway. We went and saw it. I mean, when it came out, and I believe Amanda was still pregnant, and we went to the theater, and there was like a family there, like a family with like children who were there, and very, very loud throughout the whole thing. And I was like,
he can't be loud.
Why are you at this movie? Like, what are you doing? So
they probably thought it was going to be like The Craft or something, and they got The Witch.
Maybe, but like, whatever. Like, it definitely wasn't a great experience. But even so, I was like, man, this is kind of dragging. I don't know. But people on the opposite side of things, you have like the Terrifier, that flick. I haven't seen the sequel yet, which I thought was pretty good, like a modern slasher. I thought it was okay. It was
the first one was fun. It was brutal. I get kind of like whatever, edgelord, when things get really brutal. Though. I'm like, yeah, all right, I get it. You're just really going for it, but I mean, it was enjoyable. I hear really good things about the sequel, like it being better than the original, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So yeah, it's on. I pre-ordered it. It's getting a local release. I think actually worldwide people were taken back by how popular that became. It got TikToked. So it became ridiculous. So Australia, we're always a bit behind with things that go to the cinema than what comes out in the States. Like at best, it's 2 months later at best. And a movie like Terrifier 2, you just don't expect it to ever come to cinema. It's just going to show up on a DVD or something.
Yeah.
Like the first Terrifier, I don't think went to cinema, but because the thing was blowing up, the local distributor just with 5 days notice is like, all right, we got it in the cinema. It's go see it. Like they rammed it into the screens. Yeah,
That actually makes me think of another question that kind of makes me think,
yep.
Is there much of a scene down where you live for showing older movies, like having special movie nights and horror festivals and that kind of stuff?
There's a little bit more in Melbourne that has been going for longer, because see, Melbourne itself is always been just known as more the creative city, right? So there's more musicians, there's more filmmakers. It's all Melbourne. There is stuff happening in Sydney, and it gets bigger each year. We've started to get a Sydney offshoot of the Melbourne Monster Film Festival, which is a multiple-day independent horror films. And that's where things like Starry Eyes, I think, were shown. And there's now a Sydney version of that. I don't think it's as big. But in terms of showing older films, there's a couple of cinemas that are around that do show this stuff. I'm pretty terrible in going to this stuff, to be honest. If I've got it on Blu-ray, I don't need to see it in a screen that, particularly like now it's all digital screenings anyway. I'm like, well, I'm doing a digital screening. If you don't have 35 mil, I'm not getting out of my chair.
Right.
But there's a couple of cinemas that do have these nights and show 80s and 70s horror action films. And I am actually going to, that's a particularly special one, early next month, I'm going to see a screening of Yes, Madam, Cynthia Rothrock film. It's also called In the Line of Duty, because she's coming out and doing a Q&A. I'm like, okay, Cynthia Rothrock in audience, awesome.
That's the appeal. I was lucky. There was a place called the Coolidge Corner Theater in Boston, and they're still going. They would show movies all the time. They would try to. It seemed like they would try to get the 35 millimeter prints of stuff a lot. They cared about that a lot. It wasn't always. They did digital showings a lot. And then there was a place in my hometown where, and I'm not good with names, especially of directors and stuff like that, but I saw a live screening on 35 millimeter print, I believe, of Street Trash that had
awesome
with live commentary from the director.
Oh wow,
which was awesome. Because
that would have been great.
I mean, I love that flick. I learned about that flick from like Sounds of Death magazine. I always wanted to see it. It was one of those things where I'm sure you've probably had similar experiences where like somebody dubbed it for me on VHS. It's one of those cult movies, along with like Combat Shock and all that stuff. And I was like, this is so cool. He had all these cool anecdotes and stuff about like what the crazy cop actor guy was doing now and all kinds of shit. So that was great. But yeah, I was kind of curious as to if that sort of thing happened.
It does happen. I'm just not that much of a patron of those things, and I probably should do it more often. But I am by train 50 minutes away from the city, and all of this stuff is in the city, and I just sometimes it just can't be bothered. But like to see, and this is another one I would recommend for people, the Yes, Madam, which is also called In the Line of Duty. It's also called Police Assassins, and this is a thing you learn with these Hong Kong films, is they've got 17 names.
Oh yeah.
So this is like Cynthia Rothrock's first or second movie, and it's co-starring with Michelle Yeoh, who's now blowing up again because of the what was the movie she just did? The Everything Everywhere Everyone Everywhere All at Once, that movie. She's having a bit of a second golden age at the moment. But this is a 1986, I think, Hong Kong action film where it's just the peak of that cinema. like 80s, mid 80s Hong Kong action films, mid to late 80s, is just unrivaled. It was making all the American stars and British stars just pale in comparison with the martial arts that they were showing and the kind of stunts they were doing. And they were very clever in that they would get a token whitey, so Cynthia Rothrock in this case, bring her across. And depending on which version you watch, she's probably dubbed in Cantonese. But they put that face on the poster, and then it brings the Western audience in. And the action is just some of the early wire fu stuff, just crazy. So I would recommend that one for people.
I mean, I've dabbled in that stuff, so I'd want to check that out, because like my one cinephile friend was like, "Oh yeah, you mean like there was that scene, we had the Daily Show on Comedy Central here, and very beginning of it had the story of Ricky, like the first season or two had the story of Ricky head smash, and a ton of people were like, what movie was that? And for like the longest time, that was like the only Hong Kong movie that anybody I knew of. And
that's like, crazy movie.
It's a great flick. It's that, and I think it was called High Kiter or something like that that a friend of mine recommended to me, that was like also great. I think might have had maybe some of the same people responsible for Story of Ricky help me. I don't know. I just remember like a fight scene where a guy like got his arm slashed and like gore tendons, and he like tied the tendons together and like kept fight. It was some wild shit like that. I don't remember, but that, and I watched like a documentary on the Shaw Brothers stuff, and I was like, I gotta see this, but
Shaw Brothers stuff is that's having a bit of a resurgence at the moment with the boutique Blu-ray label companies. There's like at least 3 American and British companies that are doing all these new remastered versions of Shaw Brothers movies, and it's not had that level of respect shown to them, well, really ever, because like all the old VHS were cropped from like they were supposed to be 235 to 1 widescreen, and they just boxed them in, and you'd have fighters at the edge of the screen. You could not see what's going, and then they would dub them, with usually really third-rate little like dubbing schools. It made it almost sound like a comedy, and that's why you have whole kung fu TV channels that are all dubbed, and everyone thinks it's a bit of a laugh, but it's very different when you watch them in Mandarin and filmed in CinemaScope. It's a completely different experience.
Because we grew up with that here. We had Kung Fu Theater on the USA Network that just everybody just talked about the dubbing. I mean, a lot of people watch it for the action and the martial arts, because that was super impressive. And of course, because it was the mid 80s, because it was the time of where every American boy was obsessed with ninjas. And because there was also the ninja genre, Ninja USA and all that stuff happening. like
Into
really
the
bad.
Ninja, Revenge of the Ninja. My personal favorite is Ninja 3 Domination, and also a Canon film. That's top tier.
I saw a ton of those when I was a kid, but I remember very, very little about them. I just remember being like, this guy's a ninja. He's like a redhead with a mustache, and like,
yeah, that sounds about right.
It's like what I'm wearing right now, or whatever.
There's plenty of ones like that too. When it's very much not what you think for ninja. I think some of the more fun ones, but it's often a challenging watch for the uninitiated, are the films that a director called Godfrey Ho, who's a Chinese director. He would buy these in bulk. He would buy Taiwanese dramas, or thrillers, that kind of thing. He would buy the film. He would get Richard Harrison or some other expat in the Philippines to do white guy versus white guy ninja fighting for about 8 minutes total. Put that into the movie, and then dub the whole damn thing. So whatever the hell the plot was of the original Taiwanese film's gone, and that's how you get famous scenes that everyone's seen on YouTube. of Richard Harrison with his Garfield phone,
Right.
which is the sole reason why I've got that phone.
So jealous of that phone.
It's everyone needs a Garfield phone, but that stuff was brilliant because you can't take any of those ones seriously. You've got these white guys in mustaches wearing bright pink bandanas that say ninja.
Yep.
But they're good fun. But yeah, to get to the 10 minutes of ninja, you got to get through 80 minutes of poorly dubbed Taiwanese drama.
Well,
Yeah.
There's good plot development. I don't know.
Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Well, it's like certain movies, and this is veering off from that topic slightly, but like I was really excited I got a just randomly sight unseen, and this is only like 5 years ago or something, but Silent Night, Deadly Night 2.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's just like mostly just the first movie with like a few parts.
Garbage Day.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, holy shit, this is terrible. Oh God, that was awful. But that's what I get for not doing my research.
That's into the realm of like Troll 2, where you have bad movie nights for that movie because it's so laughing along with it.
Yeah, that makes sense because I was expecting. The thing that and that was one of those movies as a kid because that whole taboo about how twisted is this making a movie about Santa, murdering people, and I'd never seen the original. Like I just came across the VHS like in a thrift store for like $2, and I was like, sweet, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, and I know there are better killer Santa movies anyway, but
it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, the first one's pretty great. There's 5 of those things.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, and the whole Troll 2 thing is fascinating because it was an Italian director. Well, the story. I mean, obviously.
Claudio Fragasso,
who wrote the dialogue. So it's like American people reading like broken English dialogue. Yep. So good.
It's a quality bad movie. That one. It's good fun.
Well, now that the cultural saturation point with the obsessiveness has dwindled, I could probably watch it and enjoy it now. But
I know what you mean with that.
About for a while, but
it is sometimes challenging to watch things when the hype is too high. Like you don't feel like you've got the space to give it your own attention without expectation. Like it took me until season 4 of Game of Thrones before I went, okay, fine, everyone shut up. I can just get on with it now. Because they would not stop talking about it. And I knew it was just going to kill me if I jumped on season 1.
Yeah, same. My thing, like at least with the general aesthetic, I don't read the books as much as I used to because I don't have time. But like I was a big, and still am, a fantasy guy above kind of everything else. And I kept, my parents were really into it. Everybody talked about it. My friends read the books. Like I kind of tapped out with like fantasy novels, epic fantasy novels with like Steven Erikson. Like I was like, I've read a bunch of those. I don't think I can read Jordan. R.R. Martin. I mean, I can't. Like, but he's like, yeah, you got to see it. I'm like, okay. And eventually, I tapped out and then proceeded to love the first 5 seasons and then have my heart broken by how much the end sucked, like everybody else.
And it pretty much is that. Like seasons 1 through 5 are really, really good, and then 6 is like, there's some stuff in 6, but then 7 and 8, particularly 8.
Yeah, it's and I watched the new series, the prequel, where everybody's blonde and stuff, and like it's all right.
I watched the first 3 episodes, and then I was about to watch, I think, the 4th one, and then my friend said, "Oh man, all the actors just got older and everything changed." I'm like, I don't know if I can be bothered.
Yeah, pretty much. Just
so I haven't gone back to it.
And I mean, like another one of my group chats is like I still stay in touch with all the people that I used to play Dungeons and Dragons with back in Salem. We don't talk quite as often, but once in a while we'll talk and stuff. And people were like, one of the guys who's actually he's in that band Malleus was like, yeah, I'm very, cautious about this, but I'm gonna watch that Wheel of Time Robert Jordan thing on Amazon. And the rest of it, like for the next couple of weeks, was like, this is so bad. Like everybody was just. I watched the first episode with my wife, and I was like, no, like this is not good.
I was excited for 2022's. There was like a string of fantasy. Like there was the House of the Dragon. I'm like, all right, and I got to 3, and I've just not gone back to it. And then I watched the first episode of that Lord of the Rings and went, oh, it's so boring.
Horrible. I didn't bother.
Oh, so I haven't gone on with it. And then then Willow came out, and I didn't even feel inclined to jump on it. I was originally excited, and I just sat back, waited. Then the first episode came and went, and I just read this sucks. Okay, I'm not going to bother. The one thing I did like this year that they got right, or last year, was the Wednesday series. I thought that was great.
So the 2 things that we streamed recently that we watched all the way through were Willow and Wednesday. Okay. Willow, I took with a huge grain of salt. I enjoyed it, but it was kind of ridiculous. The thing that I think that it carried from the movie even more so was like it's fantasy from this weird point of reference where it's like, yeah, it's sort of medieval, but it, there's actors that have American accents. There's actors that have British accents. There's stuff that like looks period correct for your typical kind of fantasy setting. And then there's like, is that an Assassin's Creed hoodie or like that kind of thing where I'm like, this is kind of just funny. Like I just took it with a grain of salt because I seem to remember the original movie being kind of weird like that, but it was 80s, so it kind of got away with it easier.
It did get away with it, and it's hard to look at it now without nostalgic eyes,
But the general plot and the stuff that happened, I enjoyed it for what it was. Wednesday, I thought was really good. My wife watched the first episode or 2 and was like, she's like, I don't really like it. It's got like a weird, like themed for teens kind of thing. I'm not really getting.
It was basically like Tim Burton does Buffy the Vampire Slayer,
essentially. With a bit of Harry Potter because of the whole.
Of course, absolutely the Harry Potter thing, but. And I thought Jenna Ortega was great as Wednesday, but
she was.
But the character of Enid, oh man, the roommate, I thought she was great. She was just like Willow in Buffy. Has that bubbly kind of anti complete opposite of the other person. I thought she was great.
I thought it was totally fun. I mean, I think that they definitely did that thing with her being the central character and weaving in the other Addams Family members and being like, look, it's Fred Armisen is Uncle Fester. And it's like, of course it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, the general plot arc I thought was really good. So, the twists and
they've greenlit it for the second season, so I'm happy with that. But yeah, it's that okay, well, we have it's an Addams Family thing. We've got to get them all in there. So look, here's Fester. He's added nothing to the plot. That was I quite liked Gomez and Morticia. I liked that they did Gomez. It was smart. They did Gomez based on the comic because if they tried to do like a poor man's Raul Julia, it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
They couldn't have done him again.
Yep. They were both. I thought they did really well. My Amanda wasn't super stoked on the Morticia. I was like, I think she did a pretty good job. I mean, it's a high bar from previous ones, but like I thought it was the thing that I saw on social media that people were complaining about were like the popularity, like how a bunch of kids on TikTok were like getting into it. Yeah, taking the cramps. It was more about the song. Like just a handful of people were like, well, I discovered the cramp. It's like the whole Master of Puppets and Stranger Things deal all over again. I'm like, why do you care?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Let them have it. Let them have it. It's fine.
It's to me like that song's great. If like a bunch of younger people know who the Cramps are, I'm like, that's probably good.
Why is this bad? Why would that be bad? And to that point, I quite like the Stranger Things. It was a longer series this time.
It was.
But I liked it, and I'm looking forward to the last season. That whole Master of Puppets effect, I've seen firsthand now. 2 different unrelated friends that have got teenage kids. Both have picked up the guitar and learned Master of Puppets. how is this bad? How's
Yeah.
that a bad thing? That's cool.
I was at a birthday party, a Fortnite themed birthday party. A friend of my wife, our kids are friends, and they were the kid was, we were getting the cake and the food and stuff and the opening presents and whatnot. It was like at one of those trampoline places. We're in the party room, and this kid's 7. He's a year older than my son, and he's like playing a bunch of songs from the game or related to the game. They're mostly, some kind of pop or hip hop or whatever. And then he starts playing Master of Puppets, and he's singing along to every word. The 7-year-old kid, it's like, chop your breakfast on a mirror. I'm like, he's like, hey, do you? I was like kind of nodding my head. He's like, hey, do you know this song? And I was like, yes.
Well, son,
yes.
Let me tell you a story. Yeah, that's cool. And it's great that you got a 7-year-old saying, chop my breakfast on a mirror. And it was only until about 10 years ago I actually learned what the hell that meant. Oh, is that what he's talking about? It's not talking about cornflakes. Right. Okay.
So, yeah, I enjoyed that. There's a lot of like weird discourse about gatekeeping. I'm like, I talked about it. I think I talked about it in one of my videos, but I'm like, how do you gatekeep a band that they sell their t-shirts at Walmart? I don't. Is this even a thing? I was like, I think it's a wildly exaggerated, like non-traversy kind of deal. Like, I don't think that really happened that much. I don't care, even if it did.
No, I've only ever heard positive things come out of that. And if 2 people that I know have picked up a guitar from it, that means a hell of a lot more people have got into it. And like it had just the same as that Kate Bush tape. Like you couldn't get a copy of Master of Puppets on Discogs after that thing.
Oh,
it was just unobtainable. Probably sorted it out now, but I know my first press Australian edition jumped in value because of that episode.
I bet. I don't even have that on vinyl, which is funny, but I never got around to picking it up. I have Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning, and my 3-disc, expanded edition is on CD that I bought at Walmart. you know, like 4 or 5 years ago. I was like, I need to own this. It's one of those records for me that is, I mean, it's a probably their best, objectively best, I think, by a lot of people's standards. My favorite's Kill 'Em All.
In maybe I think it was maybe 3 years ago now. One of my most exciting pickups, simply because I only had to walk up the street to get it, was at local, just markets, art and craft market up the street. Literally a 5-minute walk from my house. They do it once a month, little art and craft markets. Little old ladies selling homemade honey and jam and that kind of thing. Crocheted hats. There's always one guy selling records. It's the same guy, and it's the same dad rock all the way through it. So I rarely look. But I rocked up just as somebody had traded to him Kill 'Em All and Master Puppets. And he hadn't priced them yet, but I went up to him and went, don't put them down. Let's just talk money. And it was really good. So I picked them up, and they were basically near mint Kill 'Em All and Master of Puppets on this is back when Australia used to press records. I don't think we've even got plants anymore, but they were the 1987 represses across the board. You had Ride the Lightning, but I already had that one. I negotiated, I think, $40 each for Kill 'Em All, Master of Puppets, because if he looked at his phone and looked it up, there would have been a 1 or a 2 in front of those prices.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
But I got him just as the right time of like, no, let's just work out a price now. Okay. Yeah. And how much for both? Okay, let's go. It was great.
Yeah, because I've been looking at, because I have a repress that sounds fine, of like a recent repress of Kill 'Em All. I'd love to have an original, and I have a very specific, like, fond nostalgic memory of the version of Kill 'Em All that has Am I Evil and Blitzkrieg on it. And I'd love to have I'll probably eventually grab a CD of it, because that was how I came across it. But I'd love to have a vinyl pressing of that. And I've looked at that, and I'm like, yeah, all those are over $100 usually. Like
the Megaforce ones are expensive, but
the
Australian ones came out on Elektra, and I didn't realize till I got it home, but the copy of Kill 'Em All that I got from this guy turns out to be the misprint version. That was, I think, an exclusive Australian misprint. That instead of jump in the fire, on the inner ring it says jump in the air, which is just amazing. Yeah, it's just amazing.
Jump in the air. Yeah.
Jump in the air. Somebody was just not typing like, jump in the what? Air. Yeah.
Is this like that Van Halen? It's that Van Halen band? Jump in the air.
What was happening? Yeah. Jump in the air. Yeah. So that was a cool pickup. It was already a minty fresh 1987 issue of the thing, and then it's the misprint one. Oh man, what a great day!
Yeah, that's awesome. You don't get those kind of scores.
And in US dollars, it would have been about 27 for that.
Yeah,
so
that sounds about right.
A bargain.
Yeah, absolutely. One surreal moment related to that whole Stranger Things thing. I went to pretty much my first real convention, like nerd convention. I've never been to a horror con or comic con or anything like that before. There was a very small comic con. It was more of just strictly guys selling comic books that I went to in mass once. That was like in a building, like a small building. We went to the Galaxy Con here in Raleigh, and it was like a convention center, like a massive, huge convention center with pro wrestlers and all kinds of the guy who played Gustav Fring from Breaking Bad, like big name people. And it was massive and super packed. And I remember going, this is just last year, going with my wife and kid. And I think I was wearing my vest with like some patches on it, whatever. And walking around and seeing people cosplaying as Eddie from Stranger Things and being like,
yeah, right.
This feels weird.
Yeah. I've definitely seen a few people with that. What's the Hellfire Club? With that shirt. I've seen a few people walking around with that. It is weird, and I love that. I kind of hope it's a meme and not a real thing. That picture of a cliched metal guy in his battle jacket and says something like, my scene is not your meme or something like that.
That was a total joke. I
really, really hope it is.
I think the guy who it was at least reposted by the dude from Deteriorate, that older death metal band, who I think I'm friends with that dude on Facebook, and that guy's got a great sense of humor. And I think he was either responsible for it or helped spread it. And it's
good.
My culture is not your costume type of thing.
Yeah, that's the one. It's
the thing's a whole gag, I think. But it is pretty funny. But I mean,
we've got a new Deteriorate album this year, actually.
Oh, really? Okay. I have that compilation CD of all their older stuff, and they're awesome. Like.
That comp is great, but I still play the actual album, the main album. I forgot the name. The orangey cover. I play that frequently. That's fantastic. His vocals are so unique. No one really sounds like him.
Yeah,
like a weird Infesta kind of, but Cryptopsy or something. Like it's a weird mix of things. It's good.
Yeah, good band for sure. Glad they're still at it. And I believe it's Paul is his name. He lives down here now. They were originally from, I want to say Pennsylvania or Jersey or something like that. And he's in the Charlotte area now. So who knows? It's that big Immolation Obituary tour is coming there. Maybe I'll see him there. Maybe I'll introduce myself. But that Comic-Con, the only thing I bought was there was a really awesome t-shirt vendor that had shirts that had Peace from Wizards, the Ralph Bakshi movie. And I was like, I want a Necron 99 shirt so bad. So that was like the one thing that I bought. And then I got their little catalog and went on their website, and they had a couple other, some of their shirts were kind of weird. Some of them they were like novelty shirts, but one was it looked like the cover of the first Dungeons and Dragons red box with the the barbarian guy facing off with the red dragon, except
Right.
instead of the red dragon, it was a gigantic Jesus. It said Jesus is coming, roll initiative. And it's one of those
I like
shirts
that.
that like I have it, but like I live kind of in the Bible Belt, and also like it's just so weird and nerdy. I'm like, I feel a bit strange wearing this anywhere other than around the house, kind of thing.
It reminds me, a slight tangent. There was, I don't know if they're still around, but there was in the early 2000s, notorious T-shirt website called T-shirt Hell. I'm
Okay.
not sure if they're still around. They did their job was to make offensive T-shirts, but one of them, which I wanted, it wasn't too offensive. It was like you could get away with wearing that. Was on the front it said, "I found Jesus," and on the back it said he was behind the couch the whole time.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. I've seen
That
that
one was great.
somewhere. But yeah, that's great. They had a lot of stuff like that. That was like there were some different kind of references, and I can't remember. There's a cool T-shirt company, and it wasn't one of those like, not that I have a problem with them, those like Redbubble or Teespring kind of deals, but they were actually like screen printed, like really nice shirt company.
Made ones, yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't know. You want to call it? I think this has been a good convo. I never know how to end.
Yeah, we can do that. It's an hour and a half, and it's approaching 4:30. I'm gonna have to start thinking about cooking dinner.
Yeah,
5 o'clock with the kids.
How's the weather? That thunderstorm happened?
It has not. Yeah, I mean, if it's happened, then I haven't heard it. But I'm hoping that I can open up the place and let a nice cold breeze cool this thing down. Because I can't sleep in this.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been a good chat, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for doing it. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
We'll be talking soon anyway, through the usual channels, through the usual means. But yeah, it's been cool. I've been trying to get my handle on being a talker, which I never really had too much of a problem with, but trying to streamline things. But yeah, I appreciate it. We'll talk soon, everybody. We don't, a little bit like of a void not having like the chat to kind of bounce off of. But I'll be watching.
Right. I think we came up with our own.
Oh, sure. But I was going to say, I'll be watching this along with people when this premieres live, whenever that'll be. Might be heading back to South Carolina then, so not sure how that's going to shake out, but it'll probably be in the afternoon sometime. I'm saying this as if people are hearing me talk about it. Just going to stop here while I'm ahead. I'm just going to end the recording. Like and subscribe.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, that's it.
Button.
Explosive action. Go look at me.
Yep. Go. If you haven't subbed to Simon, what are you doing? Subscribe to this dude. Watch him. And me too.
Yeah, him too.